This is our third lecture in the series at the new Visual Arts Theater, or Gene's house. Our fourth will be Avatar Linnell on Tuesday, not Thursday, April 7th. Nietzsche Loves You. And we've also got the Brothers Quiet here on Thursday, April 2nd. And the New Zealand poet Winston Curnow over at 133 West 21st Street on Tuesday, April 21st. Check your local listings. And there are cards outside on the table there for the rest of the series. Since you're here, I think you probably already know who Nick Taussig is, but I don't need to tell you, but in case you don't, I'll just say that he's a professor of anthropology at Columbia University who's been conducting field work in the country of Colombia since 1969, so 40 years now. Since 1980, he's published 9, 10, 11 books, from The Devil and Commodity Fetishism in South America, and Shamanism, Colonialism, and the Wild Man to the Magic of the State, My Cocaine Museum, Law in the Lawless Land, and Walter Benjamin's Grave. His forthcoming book is What Color is the Sacred? On the spiritual presence of color in contemporary life. But I know Nick as a friend and neighbor in the Hudson Valley as part of what he's called the Shangam School of Art and Philosophy, Anarchy and Mysticism, located off Exit 18 in upstate New York between New Paltz and High Falls, including Carolee Schneemann, Peter Lamborn Wilson, David Levi Strauss, and Nancy Goldring as an honorary member. In this congregation, which usually meets in Nick's kitchen or by a fire out on the banks of the Rondout, Nick's stories, often of his travels, are an essential element, and I think we're going to get some of that tonight. Please welcome Michael Taussig.
That was a lovely introduction. Can you hear me okay? Yep, no problem. And some of you might get the images, if you find it difficult because of this podium, you should shift across. This is a drawing in my notebook of some people I saw lying down at the entrance to a freeway tunnel in Medellin in July 2006. There were even people lying in the pitch black tunnel. It was 1:30 in the afternoon. The sides of the freeway before you enter the tunnel are high there, like a canyon, and there's not much room between the cars and the cliff-like walls. Why did they choose this place? I asked the driver. Because it's warm in the tunnel, he replied. Medellin is the city of eternal spring, famous for its annual flower festival and entrepreneurial energy. I saw a man and a woman, at least I think she was a woman and he was a man, and she was sewing the man into a nylon bag. Craning my neck, I saw all this in the 3 seconds or less it took my taxi to speed past. I made a note in my notebook. Underneath in red pencil I later wrote, I swear I saw this. And after I made that drawing, as if I still couldn't believe what I had seen, when I now turn the pages of the notebook, this picture jumps out. If I ask what grabs me, my thoughts focus on what seemed to me the mix of calm and desperation in making a shelter out of a nylon bag by the edge of this stream of automobiles. I'm carried away by the idea of making a home in the eye of the hurricane. A home in a nation in which it is estimated that more than 3 million people are now homeless due to paramilitaries paid by large landowners to drive peasants off land. I might add that of all the large cities in Colombia, Medellin is to my mind the most associated with paramilitaries. There is something like a magnetic attraction between the two. And it is not by chance that in this city in particular I would have witnessed the attempt to make a home in this freaky no man's land on the side of the freeway. They have no land, but no man's land. Once there was a forest. They cleared the forest and grew plantains and corn. Then came the cattle. Everyone loves cattle. There's something magical about cattle. From the poorest peasant to the president of the republic, they all want cattle and they always want more. More cattle, that is. The word cattle is the root of capital, as in capitalism. The communist guerrilla saw their chance. They started to tax the cattlemen, and in retaliation, the cattlemen hired killers called paramilitaries to clear the land of people so as to protect their cattle and now their cocaine as well. Before long, they owned a great deal more than cattle and cocaine. They owned the mayors, they owned the governors of the different states, they owned most of Congress and most of the president's cabinet. The president of the republic comes from Medellin, and he too is a noted cattleman, retiring to his ranch whenever possible to brand cows. Imagine a cow without a brand, without an owner, running free in no man's land. Once there was a forest, now there is a nylon bag. What I also see is an unholy alliance, or at least symmetry, between the enclosed space of the automobile and the nylon cocoon into which the woman is sewing the man. The automobile offers the illusion of a safe space in a cruel and unpredictable world, a space of intimacy and daydreaming. Yet the automobile is also a hazard, being a leading cause of death and disability in the third world. As against this, consider a home on the freeway made of a bag, a home that takes the organic form of the insect world, like the cocoon of a grub, destined to become a moth or a butterfly. In this vein, I also discern a fearful symmetry between the nylon cocoon on the one hand and the concrete canyon and dark tunnel of the freeway on the other. When I ask the taxi driver why people would choose to lie there, and he responds, because it's warm, my question assumes the sheer unfathomability, the impossibility of imagining that human beings would choose such a place to lie down, same way as you and I lie down in our bedroom. My question already has built into it my fear and amazement that people would choose such radical enclosure. Why would you put yourself into this concrete grave? And his response, because it's warm, means that it has been chosen precisely because of its enclosing quality. As I dwell on these thoughts, I realize that this hideous location is chosen because it is hideous, and what's more dangerous. There at least you are probably safer from attack by police, death squad vigilantes, and by other poor people. Then there is that other movement of enclosure, the one that grabs me most, that part of the picture in which the woman seems to be enclosing herself as well as the man. Stitch by stitch, the outside is becoming the inside. The stitcher becomes the stitched. I'm reminded of a little boy years ago in a funeral service in Bogota who said, I want to live in a closet. His parents had been assassinated in the bedroom by paramilitaries, but he had escaped by hiding in a closet. All of this comes to mind when I ask myself why I drew this scene and why it has power over me. But I feel something is missing in what I have said, or in the way I'm saying it so far. Something that undoes, or at least alters, meaning, along the lines of what Roland Barthes mysteriously called the third meaning. You've heard of the third eye and the third man, and now you've got the third meaning. Barthes was a restless thinker. That was meant to be a joke. No sooner had he gotten things squared away with his semiotic theory than he found exceptions to the theory, because the very act of squaring things seems to self-destruct. Yes, he saw what he called the information in any given picture. Yes, he saw what he called the symbolism, too. But nevertheless, he became painfully aware of the shortfall between all of that and something else that lurked in the background as a decisive force in the image. I receive, and probably even first and foremost, a third meaning, he wrote. Evident, erratic, obstinate, and he speaks of being held by the image. For me, with my drawing of the woman by the tunnel, that something else in my image has an awful lot to do with a frightening, yet curiously liberating sense of enclosure, as the last gasp of protection in a heartless world hell-bent on the apocalypse as it roars into the tunnel of no return. That for me is an instance of the mysterious third meaning. For this is more than information, this is more than symbolic. My eye fixes on the woman, if she is a woman, sewing herself into the nylon bag. And there's the stillness. Barthes recalls Baudelaire, who wrote of the emphatic truth of gesture in the important moments of life. This is how I think of this woman's gesture, or should I say, how I think of my drawing of such, with what seems like the edge of the bag as a firm blue line enclosing the sewer herself. That is my gesture. But let us for the moment turn away from the understanding of any given image, as this is only half my story. The other half is the act of making the image. My picture of the people on the freeway is drawn from the flow of life. What I see is real, not a picture. Later I draw it so it becomes an image. Something strange occurs in this transition, which makes me realize how much we live by pictures, but at best have only fuzzy ideas as to how pictures relate to what they are pictures of. To me, art's third meaning is what exceeds any attempt to put a picture into words while trying to do exactly that. In an attempt to get across its skittishness, Barthes places his third meaning in the realm of puns and jokes and useless exertions indifferent to moral or aesthetic categories, such that it sides with what he calls the carnival aspect of things. To me, the woman sewing, apparently indifferent to the danger around her, can be equated with the realm to which Barthes points. But this is no carnival, although it certainly contains, if contains be the word, those wild excesses of which Georges Bataille and Roger Caillois drew our attention to in their ruminations on carnival. But the real carnival, however, is that holy day when image and word put on their masks and dance together. For all his originality, Barthes can be seen as drawing upon an older tradition, that of Surrealism, as espoused and articulated in 1929 by a German émigré living in Paris, Walter Benjamin, for whom surreal meaning has everything to do with the carnival dance of image and word. Surrealism, he said, takes advantage of the fact that life seemed worth living nowhere but on the threshold between sleeping and waking, across which back and forth flooded multitudinous images. In this threshold situation, language opened up such that, quote, sound and image and word interpenetrated with automatic precision and such felicity that no chink was left for the penny in the slot called meaning. Like the threshold to the Medellin tunnel, where the homeless lie midway between sleeping and waking, right? The threshold of the surrealist between sleeping and waking is quintessentially urban, as when Benjamin writes of the crossroads where ghostly signals flash from the traffic and inconceivable analogies and connections between events are the order of the day. It is the region, he says, from which the lyric poetry of Surrealism reports. As for these crossroads, take another drawing I did in Medellin, where just about every day I would witness a young man who was juggling sticks of fire by the crossroads under the new elevated metro in the hope that the passing motorist would give him money. When the lights went red, he would run into the middle of the 4 lanes of traffic, momentarily still, and begin his act. He was a terrific juggler of fire, but most of all I admired the cool way he juggled traffic, waiting for the last second before the lights changed to ask for money and leap from the path of the madly accelerating vehicles. Above the crossroads soars the metro, of which the city is justifiably proud. Behind courses an open sewer, a capacious concrete canal with green liquids you don't want to get too close to, aguas negras. Surrealism is urban, yet what makes it surreal is Barthes' third meaning, an aspect of the feature, a buzz, an atmosphere, a collision of opposing emotions and unexpected occurrences that make you grope for meaning when you least expect it, in a taxi rushing into a tunnel in the city of eternal spring, or witnessing a young man juggling fire at the crossroads. Like a movie, I flow onward in the stream of urban life that pours into the tunnel. but the woman, is she a woman, is still, her neck bent over. The man, is he a man, is enclosed already. He is like a deep-sea diver in one of those old diving helmets with glass windows. Why is the man in the diving helmet looking at her so keenly? That man could be me looking at her too. It could be you. Is that the eye of the hurricane? So we move from contradictions and antitheses to questions. The third meaning compels an interrogative meaning, says Barth. Now, Barth's essay on the third meaning concerns not drawings, but film, specifically film stills. In other words, a photograph ripped out of a stream of photographs making a movie. Yet in an extensive footnote, he adds that the drawings in a comic strip might qualify as well. Yet is there not a world of difference in this regard between a photograph and a drawing? More specifically, is not a drawing a reservoir of third meanings? A reservoir of third meanings because of its distance from the real? While the photograph, epitome of the reality effect, is more obvious, and to continue with Barth's terminology, less obtuse. This struck me forcibly when I discovered what is for me a new genre. Drawings in ethnographic fieldwork notebooks, namely my own, and on reflection, what little I could find of such drawings by other anthropologists and fellow travellers, such as Allen Ginsberg's hallucinations of the great being and the vomiter and the great being in the jungles of Peru, as depicted in Burroughs and Ginsberg's book, The Yahe Letters. Drawings by Kafka in his diaries, compare with my own drawings under the spell of the hallucinogen Yahe in the Putumayo River Basin of Colombia. Walter Benjamin's drawings under the influence of hashish. Freud's Wolfman's drawing of his dream, although Freud ignores completely the drawingness of the drawing in his analysis. And of course, as I've mentioned, my own drawings, as in my cocaine museum, Law in a Lawless Land, The Magic of the State, which Levi put on the announcement for this talk. It was so nice. And all lifted straight from my fieldwork notebooks. As to the value of these drawings, I have vivid memories of the copy editor of the publishing house writing to me in connection with my shamanism book back in 1986. Quote, "I failed to see what these add to the text," end of quote. Years later, Elizabeth Branch Dyson, now an editor in the same press, actually twisted my arm to include such drawings and even make a cover of one of them. And so it goes. But to get to basics, why draw? Why draw? Couldn't get much more basic question. Sometimes I draw because sometimes it seems you can say a lot more quickly with a diagram. What's more, if it's a slow, drawn-out drawing, you look a lot harder and see a lot more than otherwise. Moreover, being focused like that drawing, the rest of your mind can wander and freely associate, make connections that might not have occurred to you before. It is also the case that a drawing can serve as a very powerful mnemonic, for me, far more than a photograph. But of course, you only appreciate that after the event, and it's not necessarily your motivation for drawing. But the real reason for drawing, for me, I suspect, is the terror of writing. Because the more you write in your fieldwork notebook, the more you get the sinking feeling that the reality depicted recedes, that the writing is actually pushing reality off the page. The more you write, the less you seem to get it. That's why for a field worker, there's never enough hours in the day to be writing in your notebook. And the more you write, the more dissatisfied you are with what you're doing. Each word seems to multiply the distance between you and what the word is about. But the drawing arrests this. It impedes this rush to nowhere. This is a solid practical reason for drawing in a fieldwork notebook. But, then it is based on something whose desperation, I'm afraid, defies analysis. Mainly, however, I think I draw because when I do it, which is not all that often, I like it. And in a strange way that I do not understand, settles me into my surroundings. Given all this, why are drawings in fieldwork notebooks generally considered to be mere aids, steps towards a published text which obliterates all traces of those steps, all those drawings? They're means to an end, not an end in itself. And why is drawing devalued in relation to reading and writing in modern Western cultures, and maybe in many other cultures as well? We do everything to get children to read, write, and speak good. But why not draw too? To add insult to injury, drawing is in fact prescribed for children, but only small children, and then is brutally suspended around the age of 5 or 6. Shortly after I wrote this, I drove to the supermarket close to where I live, upstate New York, past the sign on the road. It read, "Summer Reading Camp." Even in art schools, so I'm told, drawing is having a hard time, being greatly diminished the past 2 decades, or even curtailed. My friend Nancy Golding has fought to retain drawing on the syllabus, so class in New Jersey is now scheduled to meet at 7:30 a.m. It is now fashionable, I hear, for artists to innocently claim, "Oh, I can't draw." No wonder. Why not take a photo instead of drawing, as I often do? And what is the difference between these two modes of picture making? Or is it taking? Common language used would describe the photo as a taking, the drawing as a making. And there is wisdom in that. John Berger certainly thinks so, with his notion that a photograph stops time while a drawing encompasses it. And this from a writer who has published a lot of photographs by Jean Moore alongside text, as in his studies of guest workers in Europe, a seventh man, and of French peasants, pig earth, another way of seeing, and so forth. Yet there is this other and less known Berger who seems to spend an inordinate amount of time drawing as well. To read him draw on drawing is to be struck by the intimacy he feels between the drawer and the thing drawn. The attachment to photographs pales by comparison. Berger believes that drawing is like a conversation with the thing being drawn, and is likely to involve prolonged and total immersion. My own very limited experience is that you stare and draw and stare again, back and forth it goes. A quick sketch has a bare minimum of this dialectic, but the more prolonged study can make your body ache from the tension. To paraphrase Berger, writing on life drawing in 1960, it is a platitude that what's important in drawing is the process of looking. A line drawn is important not for what it records, so much as what it leads you on to see. Quote, "Each confirmation or denial brings you close to the object until finally you are, as it were, inside it, the contours you have drawn no longer marking the edge of what you have seen, but the edge of what you have become. A drawing is an autobiographical record of one's discovery of an event, seen, remembered, or imagined." For him, drawing is also one way of addressing the absent and making it appear, a way that is much older, he says, than writing or architecture. As old as song, that inflection of language. Indeed, quote, "Drawing is as fundamental to the energy which makes us human as singing and dancing." Drawing, he adds, has something that painting, sculpture, videos, and installations lack: corporeality. This corporeality, linked to what I see as sympathetic magic, comes over forcefully with Berger's meditation on drawing his father's face after he had died, shortly after he had died. In drawing his father's face, he felt like a lifesaver saving a life, in this case by saving a likeness. In an essay published in 1976, he explains, quote, "As I drew his mouth, his brows, his eyelids, As the specific forms emerged from the whiteness of the paper, I felt history and the experience which made them as they were. Now, my interest is restricted to drawings made in fieldwork notebooks, drawings that rarely, if at all, make it into published accounts, drawings that may be larded with all manners of textual exegesis in and around the drawings, precisely because it is the text-image hybrid that is here the core of the procedure. It was William Burroughs' 1960s scrapbooks in the form of diaries, scrapbooks in the form of diaries, that alerted me to the possibilities fieldwork notebooks could acquire, as my own notebooks were, of course, in a far more impoverished and far more tentative manner, moving in that direction anyway. Burroughs expressed hard-to-believe ambitions for this procedure, placing family photographs, cut-out images from American comic books of the 40s and 50s, eerie images of what caught his eye, odd newspaper clippings together with slabs of prose, if that be the word, that he was writing at the time, pithy asides and trails of colour, all dividing up the page with the day's date at the top, like a diary. He wanted this collage to do nothing less than cultural anthropological work, manipulating the political unconscious so as to wage war on the status quo. Barth would not care much for this idea, but in light of Burroughs' wild ambition for scrapbooks, I wonder if my drawing should not be put in the category of the sacred, like a religious painting, amulet, or icon. It is the stillness and strangeness that first pushes me in this direction, a quality of holding my breath in the reality as depicted, which the stillness magnifies. Yet I hesitate to affirm this. What bravura, a bad drawing in a fieldwork notebook. How could that qualify for something as profound as the sacred? Taking exception to the idea that the Lascaux cave paintings were done so as to have success in the hunt, Georges Bataille suggests instead that they come not before, but after the kill, as a sort of homage, a witnessing, we might say, of the killing and of the corpse. Think of the Naskapi hunters, Native Americans, in Newfoundland, for instance, as recorded in the 1920s by anthropologist Frank Speck. When the Naskapi killed an animal, they would stretch it out on its back, lay a carrying sling on it, put tobacco in the animal's mouth, and sit by it, smoking for an hour or so. The animal, so we are told, is honoured this way, its reincarnation abetted, and the spirit master of the animals reconciled. Sometimes the hunter would sing and dance around the body of the animal as well. Perhaps this gets us close to Berger, drawing the face of his dead father, bringing it back to life? Question mark. What I want to draw attention to is this idea, that my drawing is a response to a transgression, and that it comes after the fact, of course, as an act of witness, such an act being a lot more than optical physics. Bataille's idea concerning Lascaux cave paintings was bound more generally to his ideas about the power of transgression, of which killing a person or an animal is but one, albeit powerful, instance. In his opinion, transgression is much more than breaking a rule. It is the breaking of a taboo, taboo being a power emanating from mystical sanctions. And to break that is almost inevitably to create another mystical force. Bataille wished to oppose the idea, frequently found in the studies of so-called primitive people, that the aesthetic impulse or ritual in general is motivated by greed or insecurity, that you draw a bison on a cave wall so as to get magical power to kill it. Survival is what is always mentioned. So-called primitive people are always up to some trick so as to scrape by. Instead, every fibre in Bataille's body was attuned to Nietzsche's view, the not survival of the fittest, but enjoyment and squandering was what life, plant or animal or human was about. Fraser, Sir George James Fraser, had pointed to the importance of mymetic magic in just those survivalist terms that Bataille scorned. Mimesis meaning that there's a relationship between an image and what it's an image of, a magical connection, if you like. So if you work on the image, draw the image, we can work on the image, it will affect what it is an image of. So Fraser had pointed to the importance of the mymetic magic in just those need to survive that Bataille scorned. But there was no need, in my opinion, to yoke the undoubted magical power of an image, the magical power of mimesis, to utilitarianism, to Fraser's utilitarianism. So he was right to point our attention to sympathetic magic, but he was wrong to think of it in those very crude functionalist terms. It seems to me true, wonderful, and troubling that if you imitate something, you gain some sort of power, and you gain some sort of power from what you are imitating, so as to exert maybe power over it. But this is a good deal more strange and more complicated than drawing with the aim of obtaining what it is that you are drawing. And we cannot and must not attribute such magical thinking, or what Freud called the belief in the omnipotence of thought. We must not limit that to so-called primitive people, but not to ourselves. Indeed, such an attribution is but a classic colonial case of projecting onto others what we want, but dare not utter, what we truly believe, but must not. Could Barthes's third meaning be intimately related to such mimetic magic? Only Barthes could not see this because of his commitment to semiotic theories of imagery? Question. And with regards to my drawing of the people lying in the tunnel, is it magical in terms of Fraser's sympathetic magic? Is it religious in the sense of Bataille's bearing witness to the taking of a life and transgressing a taboo? Or is there perhaps some other idea at work here to which these contrasting positions might point us to? I want to say that shock is a critical element here. The shock at seeing people lying by the tunnel, and the shock associated with my being in a fleeting sort of way part of the situation envisaged. Thus the image could be thought of as a way of absorbing the shock, so as to get control of it, and here Fraser comes to mind, but not so much for gain as to set up, à la Bataille, a mediation, a controlled environment, let us say, where image magic and the need to mark come together. My thoughts return to the little boy who at his parents' funeral in Bogota said he wanted to live in a closet, having escaped assassination by hiding in a closet in his bedroom while his parents were being killed. It is to this still life, still there is life, of enclosure, this compaction of time that I'm drawn in my drawing. It is to this life-denying and life-enhancing pleasure in finding an enclosed space, combined with the hideous need to do so, that makes this a sacred image, and why perhaps I spontaneously wrote in with pencil, before I drew the drawing, I swear I saw this. Why swear? Is it to emphasize the unruly unbelievability of the sighting? To emphasize that the simple act of witness is anything but simple? That to witness is not just to have your eyes open at the right spot, at the right time? To swear is a primal word with contradictory meaning. In modern courts of law, whether taken on the Bible or not, to swear the oath is the right which guarantees truth. It is that which stands outside truth so as to ensure it. Stands outside truth so as to ensure it. It represents an other source of truth which the factual truth requires. For years now, ex-President George W. Bush's White House aides refused to testify under oath to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee as part of its investigation into the politicization of the Justice Department under Alberto Gonzales. Until, I think yesterday, the aides were prepared to testify, but not under oath. And this in our grandly secular age. Imagine. The aides would not declare, I swear I saw this, I swear I heard this, I swear I said this. They strenuously refused, and this had the makings of a huge fight about, and still has, about executive privilege. But to swear also means to utter bad language, foul language. that bears the potential to magically hurt the person, thing or event at whom or which it is directed. How these two meanings combine, the truth swear and the curse swear, how they combine in magical power is a puzzle and fascinating, something we perform every day without a thought. Perhaps it goes like this, that to lie under oath about one's witnessing would be to have the swearing turn on the swearer as a curse. All this reposes deep in our language, older times, older beliefs, embedded in current ways. But what we generally mean by the power of witnessing is outside of any court of law. In fact, I think it is quite the opposite, that witnessing is called into play as a special act when there is no court of law or its equivalent. The witnessing effect I have in mind is that my drawing of the people by the tunnel is somehow naked, shorn of support other than itself. You could ask yourself here, okay, what does this mean, shorn of support other than itself? To whom or what are you swearing when you say, I swear I saw this? This is the fundamental question. Years ago in a sugar plantation in Colombia, a sugar plantation town in Colombia, I tried to heal someone from sorcery. My patient was the 17-year-old daughter of a cane cutter. I had never tried such healing before, nor have I since. Faltering in self-confidence as I sang over the sick person, I found myself drifting in my mind over the mountains down into the foothills on the Amazon side of the Andes, where, year after year, for 3 decades, I had accompanied my friend Santiago Matumbo Hoy as he cured people of sorcery with his singing and his hallucinogenic medicines. In a manner never made clear to me, this curing involved spirits, such as the spirits of the medicine, the spirits of the forest, and the spirits of the river, for starters. As I faltered in my healing attempt, my own healing attempt, heard my singing tremble, and felt my self-confidence drain away, I thought to myself, in desperation, that in order to keep singing and pull this off, I would have to be able to conjure those spirits too. Or if not them, at least the people far away on the other side of the mountains in the forest, who as far as I can tell do believe in the spirits. So I sang, and I envisioned, in my mind's eye, at least, and everything worked out good. Much later, an undergraduate student at Columbia, Celine Sparrow, told me that when she sings with a a cappella group, she finds it best to envisage the sound as an image. As the image forms in their mind's eye, the components of the sound in the singing become, she says, more balanced. Sometimes the image is of the sound, sometimes it is of the words, if it's a piece of music with words. For the la-la-la of one song, she imagines a sailboat moving through increasingly large waves. True to her name, Sparrow signed off her email with a tweet. Such imaging seems to me and to her to be a way of allowing the body to carry out complex maneuvers unconsciously. What I call the bodily unconscious requires a critical degree of consciousness, but not too much as that would derange the autonomicity of the body. Breathing, tone, timing, soft palate, and so forth. And it is the image which provides the straddling of consciousness with the body. A small miracle. This seems to me to shed light on spirits. When I sang my curing song, I had dodged the question as to whether spirits exist by substituting real people for them in my imagination. Real people who do believe or seem to believe in them, but for whom I suspect they remain nevertheless more half-real than real, if I may put it this way, just as do sparrows. The spirits may actually be seen by my friends of the forest, indigenous or poor colonists, when taking hallucinogens in sorcery-laden atmospheres. But then a lot of strange things are seen as well, quite apart from spirits. And in these conditions, seeing is not like it used to be. What is more, seeing cannot be separated here from singing. Seeing cannot be separated from singing, and is inherently world-changing as well. Spirits thus seem more like ways of touching the ineffable edge to life and storytelling than discrete things in themselves, just as singing casts a shadow quite different to speaking. When I had finished and gone back to where I was staying, I tried days later to write about this in my fieldwork diary. but it was difficult. As I struggled with the question as to what is a diary and to whom is one writing when one writes in a diary, I found I had to discard the obvious answers as self-deceptive. For example, you do not write for yourself because there's always a bigger you than yourself, a you of many readers looking over your shoulder, or else the you has become quite another you. In fact, many versions of yourself shifting around like dead souls looking for a warm body. And it is just as obvious that this other audience, this invisible audience, looking over your shoulder as you write, is there in every writer's imagination, no matter what they're writing, fiction or non-fiction or a diary. In this dilemma, I hit upon a novel idea. Might not that invisible audience reading over your shoulder as you write belong to that same phantom world of spirits I was singing to when trying to cure the young woman in the plantation camp? Here was a happy coincidence indeed. Precisely because I was having such a difficult time trying to write in my diary about what had just transpired with spirits or spirit-like entities, I hit upon a solution to the question, to whom does one write? The spirits, yes, all writers are writing for the spirits, especially when writing a diary. But then there's the collateral notion as well, that the spirits, such as Sparrow's sailing boat, sailing through the waves, are one's assistants. I'm not only singing to them, but with them, as my spirit helpers who carry the song to its perfection, thereby allowing all manners of being their freedom, somewhere between the bodily unconscious of the world and the critical degree of consciousness which is required as well. So this is my conclusion. Could it be that when one belatedly scribbles in red pencil in one's diary, "I swear I saw this," could it be that one is actually conjuring spirits? And try this one too. Might what I witnessed be the spirits of modernity, spirits of the freeway, spirits of the dark tunnel, and the fire-dealing spirits of the crossroads? This seems ridiculous and worse than sketchy, thus situating real people in desperate circumstances. Yet the equation endures, perhaps because in those very circumstances of dread and danger, real people emanate a spirit-like character that affects us all. In which case, bearing witnesses with my sketch is to hail these very same spirits. An acknowledgement from a faceless passerby as to the charge they put into the world. Or try this. It is not that they are spirits, half real at the best, but that they become spirits when produced into a drawing. Am I going all spiritual and freaky on you? I hope not. I am pointing to my mystery of writing and the allied mystery of witnessing, and I'm taking advantage of my time spent with people who could be called shamans and the time spent with myself writing and still more writing about things I have witnessed. Rather than trace what might appear as real links between witnessing and the event witnessed, between writing and audience, links which seem to me to evaporate when looked at hard, I have taken a lead from societies where shamanic practices are directed not first at other humans in their reality, but at the wider realities humans share with the dead and the spirits of the forest and the river, and these days, of course, with the spirits of freeway tunnels and crossroads. I'm also taking advantage of the fact that to invoke spirits is to invoke not so much capability as negative capability, the state of mind that can stay with the mystery without reducing it to something outside of itself, whether that be something spiritual or secular or psychoanalytic or whatever your favorite word of call may be. To me, the empiricism of fieldwork is the empiricism of lived experience. But is there not a huge problem with such empiricism and therefore with fieldwork today? Is not the ability to experience, to live experience, to dwell inside one's experience, is this not crippled by the shock-like realities of modern life? The instant of memorization that goes into, "I swear I saw this," as the taxi rushes along the freeway into the tunnel, must be an example of this foreshortening of experience whereby the self-extinguishing lived instant replaces experience. To record this lived instant by means of a drawing manifests the desperation of the need to hold on to a memory as it flashes up at a moment of danger only to die away. Freud put forward the notion that in such conditions we process experience consciously as a defense, and therewith prevent it passing into the unconscious where it would otherwise hibernate as deep memory, probably in picture form. But here's the question. If one draws the experience of the lived instant, what happens then? Freud says the person who is physically wounded suffers less from shock than a person without a lesion because the wound absorbs much of the mental trauma. Could a picture, and especially making a picture, be something like that too? The drawing I present is like a still life, or nature morte, as the French call it, dead nature. Adorno presented a formula for this when he tried to sum up Benjamin's style as the need to become a thing in order to break with the catastrophic spell of things. The need to become a thing in order to break with the catastrophic spell of things. Is this what the drawing wants too? On the one hand, coagulation into thinghood. On the other hand, and as a result, the utopian and electrifying escape into flight and freedom because of the spell that breaks the spell. This is what Benjamin refers to as weakly messianic, inherent to a strategy of demystification and re-enchantment. Enchantment, astonishment, but what sort of enchantment? Is this picture in the story it's so badly once told? In this picture in the story it's so badly once told, there is a type of holiness present, as in the dark calm of a church or a temple, but by the freeway and the tunnel, this is a negative sacred, the sacred of the negative that in other places, such as that of the dead animal in Nascapi land, may pass into the realm of the master of the animals, or like the human corpse in a Christian cemetery may pass into the positive sacred of the church. But here, by the freeway, it seems unlikely that the man in the nylon bag will emerge. We are left without redemption, just the experience that shadows experience, the lived instant. With their authority dependent on being there, surely anthropologists too should be interested in the witnessing effect. The scientific demands of their craft demands close observation of a specific but hard to define type called participant observation. And from the beginning, many anthropologists have witnessed shocking things, shocking to the culture from which the anthropologist comes, or shocking in terms of human distress. In this case, the anthropologist would seem to bear a witnessing responsibility of a kind morally and aesthetically different to that demanded by science, or what I will call reportage, aimed at getting the facts out to as wide a readership as possible. Primo Levi was a chemist who spent much of the rest of his life after Auschwitz working in a factory in Turin. He told the novelist Philip Roth that what he had in mind writing If This Be Man, his first or second book, entitled in English as Survival in Auschwitz, immediately after the Second World War, he told Philip Roth that this was based on what he called the weekly factory report. The weekly factory report. In this interview with Philip Roth, there is a marked shift in tone from the tone in the account of the camp experience itself. It is one thing to write as a witness of the lager, as he calls the camp. It is another to write as a witness of your witnessing. Can you really get inside your own voice? Levi manifests this dilemma where he states that the book was written spontaneously, quote, on impulse without reflecting at all, end of quote, following no plan. Yet years later, he says, quote, now that I think about it, I can see this book is full of literature. The idea for this book occurred in the death camp. It grew out of, quote, the need to tell our story to the rest, to make the rest participate in it, end of quote. It was, he writes, an immediate and violent impulse to the point of competing with our most elementary needs. First and foremost was the need for what he calls interior liberation. But of course we might question how successfully the book achieved that. Recall his almost continuous post-camp depression and what many regard as his suicide in 1987. And we should note also that the book, despite its avowedly non-literary and what many take as scientific approach, does strike a mystical layer, if only because of the experience it relates. Meditate that this came about. Meditate that this came about relates the line of the short poem at the front of the book. quote, carve its words in your heart at all times and places in the routine of the days. And then, continues the poem, repeat them to your children, or may your house fall apart, may illness impede you, may your children turn their faces from you. This is to curse, or may your house fall apart. This is to swear, I saw this. 40 years later, Levy wrote about the shame of witnessing the unbearable, as was expressed by the shame on the faces of 4 young Russian soldiers on horseback who rescued him that January day of snow and corpses in 1945. Quote, they did not greet us, nor did they smile, he writes. They seemed oppressed not only by compassion, but by a confused restraint which sealed their lips and bound their eyes to the funereal scene. End of quote. The scene witnessed blocks witnessing. This happens not because of guilt on the part of the witness, claims Levy, but because of a diffuse sense of shame that such a terrible thing could occur. It was the shame we knew so well, he goes on to write, the shame that overcame the prisoners after the guards had selected those who would be marched to the death chamber. Speaking about his experience before liberation. A bunch of prisoners in a cell block. The guards come and they pick you and you and you and you, but not you. It was the shame, quote, that the just man experienced at another's crime, the feeling of guilt that such a crime should exist and that it should have been introduced irrevocably into the world of things that exist, and that his will for good should have proved too weak or null and should not have availed in defense. I recall what I was told around 1980, by Colombian anthropologists who had asked some Huitoto Indians in the Putumayo River in Colombia about the atrocities of the rubber boom, made famous in 1912 in Europe and North America by the British consul Roger Casemaker. When asked by the anthropologist, the Indians responded by asking him a question, why do you want to know about such things? Only sorcerers want to know this, because they use such stories to do evil. True or false, this story has weighed on me to the present, for it suggests that, as regards atrocity, there's a great deal of wisdom in muteness, and that to enter into atrocity requires particular measures and conditions that could indeed be regarded as magical. Levy has little patience with the mute option, if option it be. When a prominent literary critic such as George Steiner declared that Auschwitz lies outside speech, or Adorno advises that to write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric, Levy flatly disagrees. As his poetry, which is a curse on the first page of his witness, seems to me to testify. He regards the mute option as a common misperception. From his interview with Philip Roth, it seems he found his polar star to steer by in the driest possible presentation one could conceive of, that of the weekly factory report. Yet the lighter may have been like a factory, but there was this difference. The product was deaf and its constituents were people. To do justice to that experience, the human in humanity, the factory report was not enough, seems to me. But what the factory report provided was that magical armature the Huitotos in my story implied was necessary. Is my drawing such a magical measure? Is it a response to the shame to which Primo Levi refers and of which he writes? Could that account for its sacred or icon-like quality? Possibly. But there has to be one huge proviso that the stupendous abnormality of what Levi lived through is all too absent in the stupendous normality of the abnormal in daily life in today's third world cities. It is this normality of the abnormal that accounts for what I deem its surreal quality, a quality which at one point in his essay on surrealism Benjamin defined or referred to as profane illumination. Levi belongs to no recognizable school, although Jewish, and at least partly educated Jewish school in Turin. He abjures religion just as he does psychology or psychoanalysis in relation to the events he relates. If anything, he belongs to Benjamin's storyteller who abjures explanation altogether. Lying here in the dark, 5:30 a.m., after my tunnel vision, a week after my tunnel vision. Feeling warm and enclosed, I can hear a slight drizzle outside, radio news crackling, footsteps outside on the pebble-covered path. No cars, no electricity, no exhaust, no TV. The bedspread is embroidered with beautiful blue flowers, the delicacy of which stand in such vivid contrast to the workaday reality here of mud and rain. The flowers are the same colour as I have painted the nylon bag into which the woman by the freeway is sewing that man. I too am being sewn into my cocoon. There is a thin slit of light coming through the wooden window shutter. I feel an immense and beautiful calm, a calm that may not last, but feels as if it could. I think of the people here as still honest, as William says when he sells on credit from his tiny shop, confident or at least hopeful that one day he will be paid back. I think of how little people have here, yet how cheerily they set about the day, how elegant they are, how immense their labour. But I have to leave that beautiful bedspread, even though I have only just arrived. The guerrilla are close by in the forest, and I can stay only one night. There was a killing here Easter, and the guerrilla will be back one day soon to take revenge on people they think gave the army information. William will take me downstream in the dugout canoe in an hour. Once a mighty tree, it now encloses us secure as we slip through the mist in the dawn. This too is the eye of the hurricane. The youngest kid in the household is about 5 years old and called Don King, which sounds like a musical gong that has been struck when you say it in Spanish. His sister, Wendy Sulai, gave him this name. This morning I see him standing on the bed with a solemn face, helping his sister Liliana with the hooks on the back of her dress. Gustavo says he dreamt a year ago that I bought him a Singer sewing machine. It was all white. He laughs. He can make a suit, he says, and learnt to tailor it from an auntie in Buenaventura. He doesn't have a place of his own, an enclosure we might say, but his temporary abode is that of a cousin who lives in Cali. It is a bare wooden building with signs of having once been lived in but now feels emptier than empty, 2 mouldy travel bags in a corner. He says he sits all day. He is childless, never married or lived with anyone. His legs are no good for working in the river anymore, searching for gold. Over the years, his legs have been hammered by falling rocks. He shows me the scars. He smiles all the time and looks dashing, as always, with his elegant thinness, with black trousers, bare feet, checked shirt and a grey straw hat with an orange ribbon. When his sister, who lives opposite and provides him with meals, told him of 9/11 in New York, he tells me he cried and prayed that nothing had happened to me. The village is full of thieves, he says. They steal chickens and they steal from each other's mines, gold mines. I know he steals a lot too, but it's more like borrowing. He wanders in and out of everyone's house all the time, free as a bird, it seems. Doña Lucia is 72 years old and washes the gold in the river every day, as well as being an expert healer of ojo and espanto. She shows me how she does it. Her movements are exquisite and convincing. Ojo means evil eye. Espanto is fright. The way she stands over the prone patient, a child, she looks just like she is panning gold in the river, bent at the hips with her legs straight. Actually, she is using 8 years old Liliana as a model. She measures Liliana's waist folds the skin into quarters, then holding each end firmly in each hand, makes her way up the child, length by length, from foot to crown. She measures the waist again. This time there is a discrepancy, a gap of 1 finger width. This child is un dedo espantado, 1 finger width inflicted with espanto, with fright. She folds the string into quarters again. And this time zigzags down from head to foot. Instead of from the toe to the head. This will close the espanto. She measures the waist again to see if she has succeeded. She admits that she can't cure a gap greater than 4 dedos. All the time, she is silently praying a special prayer. Later, she asks me if I want to learn it. She will sell it to me. I think of Gustavo and his chickens. Liliana's mother, Lilia, who embroidered those beautiful blue flowers on my bedspread, tells me more about espanto, about fright, to which children are so susceptible. Children startle easily in their sleep, for instance. For kids have visions, kids have images, especially kids who cannot speak. They see the dead and they see strange spirits. They see, and that is my word see because I can't recall what she said and it might not have been see. They see beyond the ordinary. They see other worlds, is how I understand this, and in such a state, or simply by being capable of such a state, they are vulnerable to espanto, to fright. I draw a drawing as a measure of control and a way of witnessing, as a way of marking what I have witnessed. Doña Lucia measures the body of the witness who has been traumatized by a vision of the other world, and then she uses her measuring instrument to close the body, so long as the gap is 4 dedos or less. She uses a secret prayer as well. She solicits forces similar to those she wants to back off. But then don't we all have such a prayer? I swear I saw this. Thank you.
Do you think you'll do more drawings now after writing the paper?
I'd like to say yes, but I'm really not sure. I think I tried to emphasize a couple of times that I'm terribly intrigued, and I thought I would be drawing a great storm, you know, but I'm not. And I'm curious as to what it is, and I'm also curious about keeping a diary. I think it might be the ultimate. I keep a diary ferociously when I do field work, and when I'm not doing field work, this is almost comical. My mind is elsewhere. I'm doing other sorts of things. But to make one of these books is to make these books, you know, it becomes the object of a life, and becomes as valuable as anything could be. And it has the drawings and the newspaper cuttings, and that's why I was so intrigued by the Burroughs stuff. And I thought, wow, I wonder if fieldwork could be like that, and the fieldwork diary could be like that, so it would move between lived experience and boredom and all those, the whole range from vivid experience to no experience and so on. But what is really almost painful and comical to say is that I'd love to answer in the affirmative, but I can't. And I think it is comical that the diary can always be so intense when one is doing quote-unquote fieldwork. It sounds almost so disciplined and semi-colonial or something. Somebody go to the other place and suddenly you snap into this formation. Whereas my everyday life here, I wouldn't have time to keep a diary. And I also suspect it would be completely different. I find myself doing a lot of cuttings from the newspaper about the current crisis, for instance, economic crisis, pictures and texts, but they just pile up in a big mess. It doesn't have this type of meditations and so forth.
If you were to really rearrange those cuttings, I think would it be cutting itself become kind of a drawing? I think in a way, the only thing that I'm arguing is we want to separate the one from other things that are so drastic, because there are ways to use, let's say, modern media, Maxwell, to make that sort of dramatic variation. And what I really love about this idea of reality is missing from our media.
What you really love is what?
That you could say something about drawing the text.
Oh,
or reality, as you call it.
that there is a way, and that there are people that are working with that back. It's just a very hard job.
That's a pretty radical statement of Burgess, right? I mean, elevating or distinguishing the drawing in very emphatic terms from photography, installation, etc., video. It was grist in my mill, and I had to use it. It was just like lay down and play for me. It was a gift, you know. But, you know, I don't do, I'm not enough of a visual artist or visual person to say too much about that. But of course, the drawings would constitute a type of diary. I think in this work today that you heard, the emphasis is as much on the combination of text and drawing, right, as it is on drawing per se. And that's what I guess I'm primarily intrigued by. And I don't think I spent nearly enough time along this strange feeling that I at least have. I'd like to know what other people's feelings are, that when you're keeping a diary or trying to describe something, the words seem to always be insufficient. And you sort of almost get terrified. You get to the end of the line, you keep going and keep going and keep going. And the thing you're describing seems to get more complicated and disappear the more you write about it. Now, it doesn't mean that if you draw it, it's suddenly got the opposite effect. I think that's probably a little too sharp a distinction. But I think the reason for the drawing lies in this feeling of slight despair, that the writing is just not getting it. And then I mentioned other reasons why one might draw as well, but I'm more interested in this almost metaphysical quality of how the words seem to, when you look back on it months later or years later, the writing seems, I think, terrific. The writing seems sharp and short, much shorter than you would if you had a keyboard and you're sitting, you know, in an office somewhere in a big city, removed from everything and everybody. So there's another thing to consider, how you feel when you're actually writing as opposed to when you read something you've written a long time later. And that's also the mnemonic function of the drawing. I mean, writing can have a mnemonic function, surely writing could carry you back to some time and so forth. But I do find even the crudest little crappy drawing, for example, of an event in a large number of people in a space, if you can just draw an outline of the space, a plan view, and put down where people are sitting and what they're moving and have bubbles coming out of their mouth or little captions, there's tremendous mnemonics. But again, as you could see from the gist of the talk, this is anything but a talk about the practical properties of drawing versus writing. So I'll get you next one. A bit louder.
Talking about the image, I'm curious what you'd be thinking about the calligraphic image of the hybrid like minute or prior to witnessing or prior to narrative. I mean, I'm curious, is there narrative perhaps embedded in the image?
You've got
It's like an image, like you have the minotaur exist before the myth of the minotaur became text. It's there in the image. Or the calligraphic cave with Gladstone, you have the Birdman. So this is prior to writing, as you know.
Or prior to writing.
Prior to, yeah. So I'm interested if the image, now that you're talking about images, might carry its own narrative, psychic narrative that is embraced in the image.
It might. Language contains, language we speak and write has sometimes very vivid images simply expressed, and then it has images more subtly expressed. You know, someone reads your name and they say, oh, it's all full of images, but they're words, they're not actual pictures. So how close can you get to a picture with words? The words always seem a little abstracted, right? It's so complicated because usage of words can really hit you in your stomach and your heart, like a picture can.
I'm not even sure about the fact that the word is not. I think it's our malnourishment of the word. I think the word lexiconically is the product of malnourishment. I wouldn't make a statement.
Well, in this regard, I was very intrigued by our educational practices since a long time, you know, where reading and writing, of course, trump drawing. It doesn't mean to say that everybody's a good reader, a good writer, or that everybody could be a good drawer, but there is a sort of interesting bias in favor of words, at least in terms of practitioners, people who can draw. We all look at pictures all the time, and increasingly so. The Greek word grapho, actually means draw and write. You can have it both ways, so I understand. And the way drawing is seen as very important for tiny children, you know, finger painting and stuff like that. But as I said, by the time you're 5 or 6, you put that aside, unless you're a gifted child or something, and get shoved into some special program. But by and large, drawing is a sort of crippled activity, it seems. It's something that is secondary importance, by and large, within the curriculum, so forth and so on. And that also fascinates me.
Because it is the connection of the handwriting, and I actually wanted to either kind of show, I'm a writer myself, and wanted to actually have artists do something with drawing and handwriting and relationship. But because I think it's really interesting, especially in this era when students don't handwrite enough, so I actually now make them handwrite their papers, and they get very like that. But I also don't think that drawing is a lot of students add. And I think that as a writer, I've actually started to do this thing where I start Googling and I turn it into my tool. And it's become something I do in my own sort of absence, or it becomes something that is kind of unconscious that I do. And then I have noticed that then I've actually gone back and I'll put like a phrase on the radio or the news. So it's actually turned into kind of a surrealist moment and turning into a field, kind of field so it's turning it all around and becoming a version of a field book. But I don't think it's all that separate. Drawing is not at all.
Well, in my profession, which is an honorable profession over a century, lots of people writing and lots of people doing fieldwork, I never heard anyone once talk about their drawings. Maybe it appears, but they don't. So you can see why my curiosity was stimulated. How come?
The other thing I was wondering is yours that the idea versus the other type of drawing people are used to, where they're sitting down and the focus is right there. And yours is so interesting because you're talking about that instant past.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're reconstructing.
But this is where I could do with some help.
Yeah, there's a real difference there.
I say a couple of things about that. This actually goes back to deep textual adventures. Walter Benjamin, in his essay on Bodily Unconscious, distinguished between aleveness and effarum. This was a big deal for him in defining modernity as sharp. And effarum was like traditional experience, the good old thing. We had lots of time to sit around and meditate, and he grew up more or less with a fairly homogeneous world. This sort of picture he drew of the recent past. But the modernity, like the big city, and like we're experiencing with the ups and downs of capitalism, etc., you never know what's going to happen from one day to the next, and if something has happened, this was Freud's theory in Beyond the Pleasure Principle, what is it, 1920, that the world is full of people are barely capable to absorb the experiences that they have, hence in Freud's notion, they develop more and more conscious processing of these stimuli so that they don't get into the unconscious, and they also don't become memories. They're sort of processed and somehow dealt with. And that's what led to this distinction. I was thinking, well, you know, what if we added drawing to Freud's notion of the wound? Because he makes this point, if there's a physical injury, it's somehow easier to handle, can be easier to handle than when there's no physical injury whatsoever. It's a small point in a 100-page essay beyond the pleasure principle. So I wanted to play with this distinction that Benjamin got from Freud about the modernity and shock and the difference between living your experience. And experience is a very vague word, see, that's the problem there. As opposed to this, like, the flash of a match, as I think is how Benjamin talks about it. It flares up, and it's gone. You process that one, ready for the next one, you know, this sort of picture. So that's where that lived instant comes from, and it seemed to fit very precisely to everything I told you about what went into this drawing. But as opposed, there's another thing to add to this, then, is the person who does a quick sketch, as opposed to the person who sits down a whole day or half a day or repeatedly comes back and works on the one drawing. And that seems worth differentiating, you know, from the quick sketch and the not quick sketch, whether no matter what the subject matter may be. And I have looked at some books in anthropology, for instance, where the drawings are very quote-unquote realistic. And there's one, I don't think I should mention it because we don't get into I don't know. The drawings are so frightening because they're so quote-unquote realistic, and it's done of a community in the eastern slopes of the Andes in Ecuador, and there may be a lot of drawings in this book, very, you know, maybe 30 drawings, full page, they take out black and white, and I'm really quite frightened to see them, and they speak to me as if someone who's doing this very, very careful, probably took hours and hours to draw the house and the kids playing and the women weaving and that sort of thing. In fact, I can't show it to you. The problem is I can't show it to you so you could understand immediately what I'm trying to say. What I would like to do when I say I'd like to take this further is study different types of drawings that are observed either in notebooks or actually in published books, of which there are very few. And they're usually of this realistic type, where you find drawings a lot are in letters, it seems to me, and letters to children from their father anthropologist or something like that. But I don't know how far I want to take that, because this seems to have a drive of its own. This is going hell-bent in a particular direction. I didn't want to make it a scholastic study of drawings and fieldwork notebooks. So but I do need some help in trying to pin down what is important in this, what's intriguing in this topic, if it is intriguing. Sorry? Yeah, well, some Colombian kids came up to me when I gave this talk months back in Montreal, and they were sort of upset because they said, look, you know, why aren't you out there helping these people? Why didn't you get out of the car and help them? And I thought, well, first of all, it's like 4 lanes of traffic. They're all going about 60 miles an hour, and there's about this much space between the roadway and the canyon. I sympathized with them to the extent that there's nothing all that unusual about this scene. Let me shade that a bit. I think it is unusual. I never saw something quite that grabbed me like that. And I see a lot, I've been going to Colombia for, 40 years. So you see a lot of things. I'm not quite sure why this one leapt out at me. And I had to write, I swear I saw this. So there must be something, at least in terms of my experience, that made this quantitatively different. But, you know, the point is that, as I said towards the end of my talk, when I was doing this very risky thing, I thought, which was to compare Surrealism with Primo Levi and talk about the abnormality, the extraordinary abnormality of the camps but then I didn't want to. What struck me about the cities of the third world today is that the abnormal, of course, is not like the camps, but it's taken as normal. And you've got this situation of normal abnormality that people get used to, including myself, within a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. It doesn't take long. You go to South Asia, before the Westerner, comfortable middle-class Westerner, has got pretty well used to people sleeping on the streets, etc., etc. But that was a difficult moment for me. Why single this out so much and make it into such a big deal?
Have you seen Taussig sketches?
Yeah.
And the reaction to that, those?
Not yet, no. And doesn't Derrida have a meditation on some of these?
Yeah.
I thought Seema actually gave me a book of those. Yeah, thank you, Seema. I have to give it back to you.
Michael, there's a couple of things that struck me when you were talking. One is we haven't mentioned the fact that written language was originally a pictographic language, in which the words were pictures, in fact, and they were associated with drawing. So maybe what your experience is a kind of nostalgia for that original kind of turning and drawing into words that
Yeah.
might have something to do with that. And the other thing is that what you're doing with your drawing is you're creating a kind of metaphor. And I think that's why the thing was so powerful to you, because it had a meaning beyond the bare kind of scientific meanings of the word. It was larger than words could express. And drawings do have that ability beyond words to suggest other things.
Right. Yeah, they're good points. I was thinking that someone asked me the other day, said that's really great, everything you say, but why do you draw? Why would you do a drawing? And I was forced to sort of come out with a 3 or 4 tiered explanation I gave somewhere in the middle of my talk, which you probably forgot. I started off saying, it can say a lot in a short space of time, etc., etc. But mainly it's because I like doing it, and it gives you a sense of being situated. But I was thinking that it's hard to, it sort of defies explanation why one would want to, why one would feel this strange need or satisfaction in making the drawing. I don't know if I really want to explain it at one point, but I would like to at least say that it's a way of registering, a way of witnessing that has a very special relationship to what is witnessed. And what I did tonight was to try and spell out 4, 5, 6 different ways of thinking about that relationship.
Say that about writing too. Why write?
There's no answer, right? That's what all the great writers say, as far as I can see. Nancy. Yeah, it got worse. According to me and Carol Schneer. It started off bad and it got worse. There's a lot of what?
There's an automaticity in drawing, in pictorial image, because there are automatic things. Turn that upside down, the idea of a trace, what that's photographic, and width. I mean, that those automatic, that
Mhm. Isn't it? Yes. Yeah, I don't know why that would be. No one wants to ask me questions about the curing a little kid of Espanto, and it's the way that serves as a capstone to the spiritual, the use of the image. Like when Sparrow says she needs an image to sing, Burgess talks about drawing as being associated with singing and dancing. You've got the Nascapi there. It's... Yeah. Sorry? It's probably too difficult to get into it. I couldn't answer it in a coherent way. Someone was here.
Yeah, it was so compelling after looking at your diary. And when you made the decision, you might have thought that a room full of people were going to look at.
No, that's true.
And,
Not directly, anyway.
and it's, but because I was talking about the photograph and you asked about the photograph. In your drawing, the woman was 2 or 3 times beside the car.
Yes.
So what is that? That is how you are experiencing this flashing moment. And now that I saw it, that's how I'm experiencing that flashing moment as well. Whereas if it were a photograph, my experience would be
Mm. What do you guys make of the fact that it's a bad drawing, that a person doesn't know how to draw? Is there any place for such raw, primitivistic, amateuristic? Good. Yeah.
Actually, it reminds me of my niece's drawing. At least one you showed. My niece is 6. And I guess I mean that in a good way. I find that when children draw, they don't actually look at what they're drawing. They won't look at somebody's face. When they're drawing their face, they'll look into their own minds and draw their idea of what that face looks like, or their idea of what a flower looks like, or a building looks like. Perspective and scale are totally in this sort of child's mind's universe. And I guess just the nature of the situation, if you were in a car driving by, you said 60, 70 miles an hour, this drawing is not you sitting there sketching these people, looking up, looking down, looking up, looking down in a good way. You were drawing it after the fact from a memory that was already in your mind. And it seems very rooted in this sort of child's perception of the world. And I was wondering if you had thoughts about that. Does that give it a certain amount of honesty, the sort of the child's truth? Was that deliberate?
Yeah, no, really, it's an interesting perspective you open up. I can't say very much. It wasn't deliberate.
Nick, can I just, it reminds me of what James Hillman writes, when he writes about the image and the power of the image in the dream and the violence that insensitive, not sort of artistically minded psychoanalysts can do in the process of dream interpretation. When the image rises, they close down too much over-analysis, or are arrogant enough to think that they can cleanly cut the borders of meaning around that dream and hand it to the patient on a platter, that the image will then receive the patient in a sense, never to reappear again because such violence. And it sort of makes me think that in your case, in the sense that the image chose you
Right.
what's actually happening around us. So you want to encourage that. Yeah, you want to encourage lengthy thinking. You want to encourage hierarchy of good drawing, bad drawing, and judgments, which is hierarchies and categorizations.
Yeah, it makes me very nervous. Yeah, I just felt I should put it out there because let's look at this dream image here. I think this thing went on strike.
I think it was just deliberately turned on. There we go.
That's the famous, it's on the cover of every book. The Wolfman's drawing when he's an adult, right? Of the dream image he had when he was 7 or 8 or something like that. Just, you're like a dream image too. I haven't seen you in ages.
I know.
It's so lovely that you came, and I heard the voice, and I thought, this is a voice I know.
That question is odd, whether it's good or bad, or is that part of our conditioning? Like Richard Gates, to me, I like what he did up in drawing because it left off the page that it's not about whether it represented accurately or not. Richard Gates, the writer, said that was his definition of good writing. It came off the page, left off the page. So to me, your drawings left off the page.
Imagine how much work goes into that leafing of the page. I think the questions have been great, and I think we should call it a day. That's what I'm thinking. Thank you.